They told me I'd be fined $2,000 a day, maybe even lose the dock my father built with his own two hands. And the worst part, the notice wasn't from the city or the county, but from the HOA president, a woman named Karen Whitmore, who thought her pearls and paperwork carried more weight than a deed older than she was. That's how the war started. Not with fists or guns, but with letters taped to my crab shack and rumors whispered across porches. When I came back to Seabird Harbor after retiring from the Coast Guard, I didn't want trouble. I wanted salt in my lungs, a little sun on my face, and maybe a way to keep my father's memory alive. He'd run a crab stand off our dock for 3 decades before cancer took him. Locals said his crabs tasted like the ocean itself. So I stripped the paint, fixed the awning, hung a new sign, Ray & Son Crab Company, and I thought that would be it. Some honest work, some neighbors stopping by, nothing fancy. At first it seemed fine. A few waves, a few nods. Then came the first letter, folded neatly sealed in plastic taped to my shack. It said I was in violation of HOA rules. No commercial activity, no seafood sales. Immediate cease and desist. Signed, Karen Whitmore, President. I actually laughed. My dock, my land deed, from 1957, sitting in a drawer at home. I figured it was a blanket notice, ignored it. 3 days later, I was scaling crabs when her shadow fell across my counter. "You are operating a business," she snapped, not even a hello. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Same one my father ran for 30 years. She wrinkled her nose at the smell, tugged at her cardigan, and told me this was HOA jurisdiction now that I'd need approval and seafood vending was not permitted. I told her it was private land. She pursed her lips and said, "Then prove it, because I'm filing a violation report and your days here are numbered." That night I sat on the dock long after dark legs dangling, staring at the glow on the water. I'd survived capsized cutters, smugglers with knives, even typhoons that split steel. But nothing unsettled me like that letter. Paper had never felt so heavy. The next morning she came back, this time with backup. A stiff young man in sunglasses introduced himself as vice chair of compliance folder tucked under his arm like it held nuclear codes. Another old-timer read off some nonsense about a 30-foot waterline easement. They slapped me with a $500 daily fine, and Karen pressed the notice onto my cooler like she was nailing down a tombstone. When I asked what happened if I didn't stop, she smiled sharp, venomous, and said, "Then we'll take more serious action." And just like that, people started pulling away. Regulars avoided me. Mrs. Callahan, who'd bought crabs from my family for decades, waved from her porch and apologized. Karen had told her it wasn't sanctioned, that she could be liable if she got sick. Liable. That word burned like spoiled bait. It wasn't about rules, it was about fear. The next blow was heavier. A thick envelope arrived by certified mail, cease and desist, drafted by the HOA's lawyer. Accusations stacked like bricks. Unsanitary conditions. Unlicensed contact with minors. A photo of me handing a crab to a neighbor's kid turned into some twisted piece of evidence. And the fines had ballooned to $2,000. 72 hours to vacate or face liens against my family dock. That night I honestly broke. I sat with my head in my hands, wondering if I was being stubborn, if maybe Karen was right and I was the fool. Who was I to think I could stand against a board with lawyers and money? Maybe I should pack up, cut my losses, leave before I dragged my father's name through the mud. For the first time in years, I doubted myself. But then I opened my father's old storage bin. Ledgers, receipts, faded Polaroids. And there, at the very bottom, was the deed. Parcel 3398, Hollis Dock, recorded in 1957. I held it in my hands and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just stubbornness, this was legacy. And Karen wanted a war of paper fine. I knew how to fight that battle. I gathered everything: maps, deeds, zoning exclusions. I filed a complaint with the city. They told me point blank the HOA had no jurisdiction. Covenants don't override property law. I felt air in my lungs again for the first time in weeks. But Karen didn't back down. She sent flyers, whispered rumors, turned neighbors against me. One morning, I found my sign torn down my cooler, overturned padlock, Pride. It wasn't subtle. It was a warning. I didn't call the cops. I just sat there on the dock staring at the broken pieces, feeling the weight of a different kind of war, the kind fought with silence and paperwork, not fists. So I fought back. Installed cameras, posted signs, collected evidence. And when the HOA scheduled their quarterly meeting mandatory attendance, I showed up in full Coast Guard dress blues. Not to intimidate, but to remind them I knew how to hold a line. The clubhouse was packed. Karen controlled the room like a queen addressing her court until she reached the agenda item, unauthorized seafood sales. She didn't say my name, but every eye turned to me. Complaints of Oder Siegel's liability. Then she looked straight at me and asked if I cared to respond. I stood, walked to the podium, and laid down 3 documents. The deed from 1957. The zoning map proving exclusion. The HOA meeting notes from 2009 confirming my parcel was out of their reach. Then I said, "You don't own my dock. You don't control my business. And you do not have the legal right to fine me, threaten me, or erase my father's legacy." Silence. Then clapping. Then half the room on their feet. Karen's face drained of color. That night I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. It wasn't. A week later, she called the sheriff to my dock. I watched her arrive in a black blazer, pearls gleaming clipboard in hand like it was a sword. She told the deputy I was operating illegally, that I'd threatened the community. The deputy asked me for proof. I didn't argue. I just handed him laminated copies of the deed and exclusion records. He read them, looked up and said, "This is private land. HOA has no authority here." Karen's face twisted. "He forged those," she hissed. The deputy shook his head. "Ma'am, these are notarized county documents." She sputtered about them being outdated. He corrected her, legally binding. When she realized she'd lost right there in front of everyone, her hand trembled around her clipboard. She stormed off, heels clacking like gunshots while neighbors peeked from curtains watching. Word spread faster than her fury could carry it. And that was the turning point. The board meetings turned hostile for her. Residents began speaking out. A woman stood up and said she'd been threatened with fines for wind chimes. Another for a service dog ramp. A mother for her kid's sidewalk chalk. One by one, the truth surfaced. Karen's reign wasn't about community, it was about control. The final collapse came at a public hearing downtown. Packed room, local media cameras flashing. I told my story, start to finish handed over every piece of evidence. Then, the city's legal office announced they were opening an investigation into the Seabird Harbor HOA for abuse of power and harassment. They called Karen to respond. She stood voice trembling, claiming everything she did was for harmony and order. But when residents began standing one after another sharing how she'd bullied them, her mask cracked. Sweat rolled down her temple. She snapped, shouting into the microphone, pointing at me, calling me a manipulator, a menace. Papers soaked in spilled water, her voice rising into a full meltdown. Finally, she stormed out of the chamber, heels echoing like the end of an era. The next morning, her resignation appeared in the paper, effective immediately. That's where the story ends. No parades, no champagne, just silence where her threats used to be. And if you take anything from this, it's simple. Never let someone rewrite your history with nothing but fear and paper.